Good evening, everybody. The YouTube live stream is just beginning, so once that gets established, we'll be ready to roll. We're good, Madam Chair.
Whenever you're ready, Jean.
Oh, yeah, there were extras at the front table, too.
Oh, just because it's nice big kids.
Well, and you've got your notes on the other one. Yeah, it looks a little low, huh? And it didn't twist right. So that would have been Sean's from last night.
Water. Yeah. Do you need a pen? Yeah. Just want to make sure you're ready. Are you ready? Okay. All right, everybody, we're going to get going. I'd like to bring our meeting to order. It is 6:13 on March 29th. It's Tuesday night here at the train depot. This is the Town of Loomis Land Use Committee meeting. We are meeting here at the train depot and also on Zoom, and that link can be accessed via our website and on tonight's agenda. And we do have a member of the public here as well, which is great. And so with that said, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's have roll call, please.
Yes. Chairperson Jan Clark Kretz.
Here.
Bonnie London.
Here.
Jean Wilson.
Here.
Randy Elder.
Here.
Ramona Brockman.
Here. Sorry, here.
And Greg Obranovich.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, now's the time for committee comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody on the committee? Or any public members? This is the time for comments not for items not on the agenda.
Nope.
All right, hearing and seeing none. Now it's a time to adopt tonight's agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have
Oh, okay.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Cheryl Benson. Can you hear me?
Hold on.
Yeah. Yes. Oh. I can barely hear you, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk. Okay. One of the things that you referenced in the last meeting was ulterior or alter the road name, or like artery. Okay. You referenced Brace Road as that, and Brace Road currently is not. It's a primary local road. My concern about that is you're trying to squeeze this all in as a road that looks much like Roseville Express, where you have setbacks and you have, that kind of thing. My concern is that was designed 40 years ago. How are you going to do something like that on Brace Road? Brace Road wants to stay a 2-lane road. This is my understanding by most people I talk to. And they're not interested in that kind of expressway going through town. That's my comment.
Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Oh, now I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Excellent.
Good.
All right, any other public comment? All right, now let's move to an adoption of the agenda, please.
I move we adopt the agenda.
A second. Thank you, Randy. Roll call, please.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Randy Elder,
Yes.
Jen Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Gene Wilson,
Yes.
and that's all of us. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Now public comment on consent agenda or any committee comment.
None for me.
Okay. Hearing and seeing none, is there a motion?
I move we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second that. Can we have a roll call, please?
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Jen Clark Kretz,
Yes.
Gene Wilson, Randy Elder.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, let's move right into committee matters, and where we left off last evening, I believe we are on LU 15. Is that right?
Correct.
Mary Beth? Okay.
Come on.
Mark, could you expand that just a little bit?
I'm going to buy you a magnifying glass, Andy. Yes, I will expand to see what I can do here.
Thank you.
For
that
our,
better?
for our participants on Zoom, the chat function, I believe, is disabled. So whenever you're ready, please raise your hand and we'll put you in the queue. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, if you're ready for me to begin.
Please.
All right, we'll look at LU 15 and the objective here. And as before, purple is stuff we've looked at already, I think. LU, the yellow text is new, and then we have the italicized and underlined for changes, strike through for things that we're recommending go away. So, and I will do like I did yesterday and only show simple markup so you don't have to see all the formatting. Make it easier to read. So if it pleases the committee, take a look at that and see if there's anything there that you would like to change.
No.
I have a question on LU 15 itself. Is this going to get moved over to what
Yes,
area?
it'll be moved
Okay.
under goal
Where-
1.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to make a note here, Kristen.
No, that's okay. I've got it in. I've started to compile a rearrangement, so it's
Okay.
over in one.
Fair enough. All right. Is there anybody wants any changes there?
I'd just like some clarification. What exactly is human scale?
In the design world, that means that things are done with people in mind. So you'll have lower streetlights, you'll have accessible porches. It doesn't the grandiose, 3-story colonnades that you'll see in some urban environments.
Thanks, I like that.
And it's using language from existing design policy number 4. So that's where human scale is coming from your existing general plan.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing to see in the design aspect, particularly for small towns. All right, if I don't hear any objections to what we have here, I can move on.
Are we at the one about Barton and Rockland Road yet, or not there yet?
Somebody needs to turn Jean's microphone on because it sounds like she's a million miles from here.
Are we at the one on Barton and Rockland Road? Is that what?
Not quite yet. Not quite
Okay.
yet, unless
All right.
the committee's done with C and D, and then I'll move on.
Again, just if anybody has any objection or issue, please just go ahead and raise it. And if there isn't any, we will move on.
Okay.
And now,
Okay, so this is what Jean had requested on the to go back and put the text in of the policy for the corner of Rockland and Barton. And I believe at the subcommittee meeting, we adjusted this because some of this, for example, changing from 2.3 to 4.6 within a designation, that's just a no-no. If you want that, then we change the designation of the roadway on the map. Otherwise, it's a gotcha for the landowner and for anybody coming in. And then the rest of it, I believe the access can certainly be there. But I'm wondering whether the committee would consider additional setbacks along all of your arterials to allow for trails and additional landscaping along the busy streets. But that's a discussion for the committee. If we're going to have setback here, we should probably define what we mean.
Well, frankly, I have an issue with the way the objective is written, because I don't think we want to encourage development of residential uses on Barton and Rockland roads. I was talking specifically about that corner parcel and not encouraging more development along Rockland Road. Has a splittable parcel there, probably, maybe 2. And Barton Road has a mile up Brace and I don't know, 2 or 3 miles south. So this makes it sound like we're encouraging our whole rural area to get more developed. And I don't see that that's what I intended. I intended something specific for that, basically the Nuns property, the school and our what would be R1, not to encourage the whole area to get more developed. I think that sends the wrong message to developers that, hey, we're saying we want to develop a lot of stuff out there, and we don't. We want to keep it rural. So
Yeah,
I was trying to say, should we say anything about that corner piece? And I guess, frankly, I'd rather say nothing than something like this.
You have to use a microphone, otherwise people can't hear you.
Well, along Barton, if they did put in residential, the density would be very low because of the zoning. So I don't know that, I mean, they could develop residential now, and I don't think it would be too overly intrusive, as long as they don't change the zoning. So it really is, maybe the implication is that they might want to increase density, but they really won't be able to.
I just don't like the idea that we're saying we're encouraging more development out there. I don't think we want to say we're encouraging it. If it happens, it happens, but to say encourage says to me, green light, go after it. And I don't think we really, you know, there's been so much written about preserving our rural corridors. I'd rather see nothing than have something like that in there.
Well, or we could just, instead of have that objective, have the objective say something about if development occurs in this area, we want it to be
Train.
For that objective, how about maintain residential uses along Barton and Rockland roads?
I don't know if that's it. I think that the objective was the setback and retain native vegetation and terrain features and preserve the present appearance as a rural road corridor. I think that's what it should be.
Maybe that's what our objective is, not encouraging development, but to maintain the appearance of a rural corridor. And then these things could fall under that. And do you want to have it specific to the corner of Rockland Road and Barton Road, or if it's simply maintain the appearance of a rural corridor, then it could be both. It could be the entire area there, I suppose.
Yeah, or down Laird, or
You need a microphone, especially with the train. And should we maybe take a pause for the train? And Randy, we see your hand up, so Bonnie's going to talk and then you.
I mean, that whole area is rural residential, and I think you know, to your point, to preserve that rural feel to the corridors.
Randy, go ahead.
I agree with Jean. I think by saying that we encourage a particular type of development, we have to be careful in areas that are residential and rural in nature, so that they do not become overdeveloped. But by the same token, we do have land use designations and zoning that says that only so much can be built on a particular parcel. So that takes care of that issue. I don't think we need to beat it up too much. Just make a simple statement that we want development to be consistent with the land use designations and the zoning ordinances in the town of Limits. And one last thing. That was the 4 o'clock Amtrak.
Okay, so Randy's suggesting more of a sort of global statement. I know we were talking while the 4 o'clock train was going by. We were saying that perhaps the objective should be narrowed down to preserve the present appearance for all rural road corridors instead of the encourage the development of residential uses along Barton Road.
Question, are we talking about all the town and those rural corridors, or are we really talking about that Barton Rockland Road area?
Well, I think that's how it started. And the objective doesn't really Well, I guess it's changed now. Maintain the appearance of rural corridors.
If you want to do that, why don't you just delete that and leave it alone, say nothing?
Yeah. You want to just delete this? Anybody?
And that gives you a little bit of wiggle room if you do need to make changes, like on the corner of Barton and Rockland Road. There's no statement blocking you from doing that.
And all that's going to have to come through the planning commission anyway.
Right.
And on that policy underneath, policy LU hashtag this, the first one there, that's already in the circulation element, that you can't have driveways on on collectors, things collectors. So that's sort of redundant. Calling out specifically Rockland Road, you don't really need to do that if it's already a policy somewhere else.
No.
I do think that keeping that policy of providing new trails connecting to existing and proposed trail systems, we should keep that somewhere and move that to something if it's not already somewhere else.
I think it's in Park and Recs too.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of these are redundant with other areas. So that's why I asked if we're talking about that intersection or not, because we already cover these elsewhere.
Well, I think it would be important to have that as a sort of a Loomis policy, not site specific. But I know you said it's in other sections already, and is it appropriate to have it in the land use as well? I know we already talk about it in certain areas, but
Yeah, just as a general rule, we don't duplicate policies. So once you complete this tonight, we as your staff are going to go back and look at the entire comprehensive general plan and make sure there are no duplications.
Okay.
And if there are things that are close, we'll bring them to the planning commission and get your direction on that. But again, you don't need duplicate policies. You don't need multiple policies. Say it once and it has to be consistent. So we will be reviewing the entire general plan for that.
Could the idea of a policy of preserving the rural corridors, could that go under the LU15, the objective of support the preparation, sorry, to maintain the distinct identity and small town neighborly character of Loomis through and the preservation of open space and natural resources? I mean, could it just go into that section?
It could go into that section. And I think we already have a similar policy. So I think maybe, Mark, if you would just note that this, if the committee wants, that there's a maintain the rural character on these rural roads, and let's make sure it's in there. But I think it is, so we'll just make sure it's in there, in the appropriate location. And that probably is best in the circulation element rather than in the land use element.
and then the subsequent policies, we would,
Those subsequent policies are already in the general plan, as Christy said, so
Okay.
just, unless you want to make them specific to this location, but right now they're for the entire town.
okay.
Okay, so is there anything else we want to discuss on this corner? The only thing we didn't talk about is what sounds like a request to have an additional setback.
Mark, I believe we've already have a policy about setbacks along the arterials. If not, early on you suggested that, and I think that should be an overall town policy, is these setbacks along arterials for landscaping, trails, et cetera, would be an appropriate policy. And probably not just this one location, but all locations.
In the circ element, you think?
Yes.
Probably where that is. Okay. We'll double, triple check that to make sure. All right, are we moving on from here?
So it looks like we're on implementation measures now.
Does anybody mind if I get rid of this awful yellow?
That'd be wonderful.
I just can't. I know why we did it. It's just, it's hard to read. Okay. The first one is amend the zoning ordinance and adopt design standards that require commercial development to buffer residential uses from noise, light, night lighting, and other impacts of commercial uses. We'll probably wordsmith that a little bit because I think it should probably be commercial or basically non-residential uses. But this comes directly out of some of the impacts we have at the northern end of town. And the idea is that we want to make sure that our zoning code gives us enough to go in and actually enforce things.
Yeah, and it is from the old general plan as well.
Mm-hmm. Then the next implementation measure here is update the zoning ordinance and zoning map to be consistent with the general plan. This is state law. I don't know that it needs to be an implementation measure, but it's nice to be there and remind everybody it's supposed to get done. Then the next implementation measure is adopt and maintain design standards and a development code for the town, including, and then we have these bullet items, and this has become a catch-all for everything that the various committees and subcommittees have said we'd like to do. That really needs to get into a standard as opposed to a general plan policy or a goal. You don't have a goal about a noise wall necessarily. But here they are, and certainly we can add to or subtract from or wordsmith as the committee desires.
Okay, and we have some public comment. Cheryl?
I don't know if this is about exactly what we're talking about now, but you did say something about setbacks and easements to include, you know, paths and all this on all the roads. Are you saying all the roads in town, main arteries? You're talking about this Brace Road. I don't know if that's the current general plan that you're referencing or the one we're voting on now, that this is an arterial road. Is that in the old plan or this plan?
Well, this would be suggested in this one. It would only be for major roadways, major arterials, those types of
Yeah,
things.
but you're talking about Brace Road, and Brace Road is a primary local road. It's not.
Actually, the Brace Road in the existing general plan circulation element is a 2-lane arterial, and that's carried forward in the element as it's now written.
Okay, a 2-lane arterial, my understanding. So you're saying that in that there is stoplights and all these other things, and there's easements on both sides that are for walking. You know, that's a great concept, except like I said, in the Roseville Parkway, they designed that 40 years ago. And all that, it's a beautiful design. And they put it in new and they have all that there. But now you're talking about going through everybody's yard to create this kind of thing. I live on Brace, and this is why it is an issue. And not only that, not for me, but for other people. So I'm concerned about that.
So a couple of things to consider. First off, these sorts of policies typically refer to new development.
Okay.
We don't go back and we don't take people's property. We're forbidden from doing that.
Okay, it's policy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it is a policy.
Okay.
And the other thing is that often these things have a sort of unspoken, if feasible or when feasible, attached to them, because there are limited resources for a town like Loomis. They're not going to wander out and just do a bunch of trails or a bunch of sidewalks if they don't have the right of way and we don't have a development reason for that. This is really geared toward new development, not toward retrofitting. Now, if Brace Road at some point in the future, there was funding to widen it, then that's a whole different discussion and you would be involved at every step of the way on that. But this is really for new development or for new projects along existing roadways.
Yes, and thank you. And I think that we really need to stay in the slow growth form, because we can't even catch up with the services that our town needs to provide us to do a lot of these things. And I mean, they're stressed down at the town. I know they are, just trying to get law enforcement and everything. We've got to slow this down. There's a reason for it. But thank you very much. That was helpful.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank
Dottie? Dottie?
Hi, is it bullet number 2 talks about sound walls and noise barriers. Is this something that is being adopted in Loomis? Because it's my understanding we can't have sound walls. Thank you.
Existing policy does discourage sound walls, but it does allow sound walls. And I believe this regarding landscaping and setback requirements, and Chrissy, correct me, but I believe it's an existing policy, and it's there that if there are sound walls, that you can in fact require during development review that landscaping is put in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have a number ending in 0956. Go ahead. And if you could state your name, please. Did you unmute? Still can't hear you. Phone number 652-0956.
Hi, yes, it's Miguel Yukovich.
Oh, hi, Miguel.
Why I called in is the raise your hand feature working? Because I tried it right in the beginning of the meeting and never got a response.
We started our meeting late. We were waiting on a quorum, so we actually didn't start the meeting until 13 minutes after 6.
Well, this was when the meeting was in progress, and it was the first item under, I don't know, L something. It talked about standards for design and things of that nature. But that's not the point. Is raise your hand feature working?
Yes.
Yes, we saw your hand up just this time.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. All right.
I guess we could, surprise Jean didn't catch that.
And horseshoe needs to be capitalized in the first bullet.
I'm lost right now.
Oh, yeah. Must have caught Jean on a slow day. Or she's so used to my awful typing that she's just rolling her eyes at me. Okay, if we're done with this, and certainly the commission and can add to this bullet list, this is not meant to be a complete list of all the things that go into design standards. These were simply issues that came up as we were discussing, and this is where they ended up. Okay, another implementation measure, more design standards.
Hold on one second, Mark.
Yes.
Jean, did you have a question about a prior?
I had a question on 12, the description that was put in for the old business park. It says between Sierra College Boulevard and Webb Street. And Webb Street is quite a ways up from that area. It is not RE.
Where are we?
She's back. What was the number, Jean? 12 what?
12.2, which we did the revisions on it. But when I reread, at least all I had to work with this afternoon is the updated version, which I got from Mary Beth, which isn't quite what we're working with tonight. So if I'm a little jangled here, the description, oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be closer. The description of the old business park is that it's the area between Sierra College Boulevard and Webb Street. And Webb Street doesn't seem like the right description for that.
We'll check that. We know it's the triangle, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, when we were looking at this description, we went beyond the triangle a bit, but if you want to, because how do you describe the triangle? So it was from Sierra College Boulevard and Webb Street seemed to be kind of a natural area to define that area. So if there's something less that you want, but to try and say there's a triangle of land that this applies to, we were having a very difficult time trying to describe that.
Well, one of the problems is that those are already developed parcels and they're completely different land use designation than the 2.3 we're talking about. So it seems strange to do that.
What would you like to do?
This is one of those things. This is just going to show up on the map, and then it will be done. And then we can call it out if you want, or label on a map or what have you. I mean, we could spend the rest of the evening trying to find out how to do this because there's no real boundary roadways. I think it would be faster just to show it on a map, Andy, or show an area and call it out.
All right. So then what we'll need to do then in the objective is to refer to the map.
Yes. And that will capture just that area, and then we don't have to worry about any overflow.
And if this is all one parcel, you maybe could even put the parcel in there or something.
Yeah, we don't typically do that, Gene, because parcel numbers change all the time.
Okay.
And Mark, there's no way we would have taken all night to come up with that boundary line, just saying.
No.
No, you guys wouldn't have. I would have been trying to figure out how to do a meets and bounds. And
I was just thinking about a surveyor, 5,000 steps to the west, 4,000 to the north.
3 rods and 2 links to the
Right.
left.
Oh.
Was that the only one that you had, Jean?
The only other one I had was when I reread what we did for the TD, and it looks to me like in our messing around with it, there are some things that are out of place and don't really work. For instance, saying, okay, find my other paper clip here. The first policy, LU 9.2.2, about being set back from the street, really belongs with the Brace Road section, not up in the Turtle Island main development, because we don't, I think we want people to be able to go into a main commercial area there and not say that the buildings have to be all set back in that particular area. So I think that one probably needs to be moved down and put with 2.5, where commercial uses shall be set back and buffered from Brace Road. This one about the buildings really belongs with that, not with the main commercial area that we should be discussing first there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I made a note we'll move that one. Christy and Andy and I get in here and start looking for redundancies. So that looks like that was also repeated down here in the other discussion we had. So we'll reconcile, Gene, and we'll move it where it's supposed to be.
Okay, that was all. Move on.
Okay, so the next implementation measure is to adopt and maintain design standards that require orientation of commercial buildings to ensure sidewalk orientation. I think we need to use orientation more times in there. Natural materials in the facade and lighting, encouraging stone, brick, and outside seating compatible with the existing town buildings. Andy, I don't know why we couldn't. Did we decide, or did we discuss that the various subcommittees having a separate set of downtown design standards, or just having a set of standards that cover various areas?
The business or downtown committee did suggest having possibly different standards for downtown than other parts of the town, which would then be incorporated into the design standards.
Fair enough.
And I think there's policies in that section, but again, we're getting to a point now, I can't recall where we did or didn't. So if the committee desires to keep this policy, we will go back and find if it's duplicated and if it's where it needs to go in the appropriate place. So these policies down here are kind of leftovers that need to be assembled in the right location.
Because I have a feeling that it is in
And these other two implementation measures, basically variations on the same theme. Adopt new design standards that talk about massing, scale, and parking, and then also development code issues, making sure everything's consistent. And as Christy notes, some of these may or may not survive because, like I said, a lot of this is state law and some of this is covered in other sections. So if we do end up having to delete them, we'll have a note for the Planning Commission to explain why and where they can find the repetitive text. These two down here deal with modifying the zoning ordinance to include total coverage and floor area ratio as defined in our definitions. And then a lot of these were in here because either the subcommittee or the committee wanted us to make sure that it got done. So this would happen anyway, but that's where we are. And then this one is to amend the zoning district or zoning map to identify different coverages in the downtown and along Taylor Road and Horseshoe Bar Road. And this was brought up, I believe, by this committee. If not, it was the downtown committee, in that in a lot of zoning codes, downtown commercial has 100% floor area ratio, whereas 100% coverage is allowed. And this committee thought that that might be appropriate for a couple of blocks in the downtown, but not for the entire area. And so the idea was to maybe have a central core that could have a higher coverage. And then as you moved away from the core, then the coverage would go down. And then that would need a map and a figure for the general plan to support. The thinking was that we didn't just want to say all commercial of a certain type gets 100% coverage, because that's probably not what the town wants to see, particularly along Taylor Road as you move away from the intersection of Horseshoe Bar.
I was wondering if there might, though, be some parcels on Horseshoe Bar that eventually would want to be considered for that. Right now, we have a number of old houses, some of which may be retained and turned into commercial, but some may be torn down and something else put there. Mm-hmm. And depending on how we're defining the coverage, the Johnson and Perkins lots may end up with maybe all coverage except for some little landscaping strip or something. So I agree it's a good idea to define it, but I'm not sure that we should limit it right now to only along Taylor without having looked at those properties to see what might be coming up in the future.
I thought this committee actually talked about where that downtown area was, which was Interstate 80, up Horseshoe Bar to Taylor Road. And Christy, what are the extent on Taylor Road? So is a
and then shed to shed on Taylor.
Yeah, that's right. Shed to shed on Taylor Road, Horseshoe Bar down to basically Rayleigh's is what I believe this is the committee that had suggested that as the downtown.
Well, that makes good sense given what we have right now, but I'm thinking about there's the town property that below High Hands parking lot, which would probably not be included in shed to shed, but we might want to be including in the downtown. So just saying shed to shed would not include the one that we've had a couple proposals on.
So I threw the word generally in there because this is an implementation measure. The boundaries can change when you start studying it. You're going to need a lot more information than we have. So if I throw general in there, that might keep Andreas happy so that we can say we can move this if we need to.
Okay.
And if we're going to be that general, Christy, we probably shouldn't use a map because maps develop a life of their own.
I think you're right, Mark. Yeah.
And that committee is that.
Now, the question I had was about the full coverage, because At one point, I thought this committee talked about the difference between building coverage and total coverage, which I assume is what you mean by full coverage.
Yes.
And we kind of thought that what we really wanted was building coverage in general because of all the, unless we're talking about only specifically the downtown, because in general, we don't really want, I think we looked at and talked about not having total coverage for a lot of places where what we really mean is the building coverage, and we don't want to have a developer get those two things confused.
So Christy, we have that in our definitions, right? We should probably shift to that and deal with that specifically. You're on mute, my friend.
Thank you. Are we done here that we want to switch over to the definitions, or?
Well, I think to Jean's point, she's probably not happy with this until we can clarify what we're talking about in terms of terms, not putting words in Jean's mouth, but that seemed to be the gist of her question.
Sure. Let me share.
And I think she's talking about the final implementation measure.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I see that.
And I know this committee spoke at length about this, and I'm wondering if what we're looking at is what fleshed out of that meeting.
Kinda. In all its warts and everything, Chair.
Okay, so bear with
I'll
me.
stop sharing. I'll keep, but I'll let you share. That way we're not competing.
Okay, can you see this? Do you see a definition for site coverage?
Total area
Yes.
occupied by structure.
Okay, so these are the definitions that we ended on the last time we talked about the glossary. So site coverage structures, their percentage of total site area occupied by structures, and then site coverage total, the percentage of total site area occupied by structures and impervious surfaces such as driveways and patios.
So in this last measure that we were looking at, it uses the term full coverage. And is this referring only to downtown, or are we talking about the whole town? We're not usually talking about floor area ratio for anything but the commercial kind of buildings or maybe office buildings. In other words, not the main residential. We don't usually talk about floor area ratio there. And I don't think that we meant for the for the residential kinds of things to include full. Well, we probably should, if we're going to say full coverage, if what we mean is total coverage, we probably should use the same term.
Yeah,
Is that what we
I'm
mean?
looking.
Correct.
I'm looking right here. So for, all right, Christy, why don't you select those two and email them to me in the chat, and then I'll bring them in as a comment so we can use it while we're wordsmithing. And you have a typo under zoning.
I know, I see it.
The chat is disabled.
Oh, well, just email them to me then, and I'll jump on it right now.
So the previous implementation measure refers to total coverage, it's the glossary term, and floor area ratio, but we're not going to include floor area ratio on everything in the zoning, right? Only for the.
It's only non-residential. Non-residential.
Non-residential.
All right, so let's put this here, here. Get rid of my email. I need more screens. I didn't think I'd ever say that. I need more screens. All right, can everybody see? So here's this. Sorry. So we need to identify where coverage. or lower.
And landscaping is not included in that coverage, is that correct?
Correct. And
That's
Mark,
correct.
you can't say total structure because total is one kind of coverage, structure is another kind based on the definition.
Okay. Where structure coverage may approach 100%. And other areas where structure coverage may be less. And I mean, I think we can use this as our guide, but honestly, that is enough. And then we could have here, define which parcels in the center town. Oh, that works. That. Oh, let's see. Maybe I'm thinking this. So this would be site coverage, not structure coverage. No? What do they mean structure coverage?
You have site coverage in both cases. One is structure, one is total. So one
Right.
is, yeah.
Because I would expect that most everything downtown is going to be total coverage. The question is
Correct.
whether the building can be all of that. That would be the floor area ratio, or whether we don't allow that. So structure coverage is the appropriate term there.
I recall in that conversation, I mean, the distinction was the town center areas that come off of I-80 to Horseshoe Bar, that we wanted to maintain some landscaping, because what I heard from people with the village is that they didn't like just all the concrete. They want the trees, the greenery, and that's kind of the gateway into the downtown.
Yep.
Now, also recall that you have policies in here to actually have specific gateway design standards. So they'll be a little bit different. So as a town gets into actually developing the standards, you're probably going to see what happens around the gateway will look a little bit different than the downtown.
And my apologies, just to kind of go back again to the sound walls. With this measure, does that also include some kind of standards for sound walls? Because I don't know much about sound walls, but from my understanding, they're not all created equally, that some are less appealing than others.
So the design standards that would be developed will get into more detail on the sound walls. At this point in time, the general plan doesn't get into that much detail, other than saying they're discouraged, but they can occur if necessary. And then what you want to do is in the design standards, say, these are the things we're looking for in our sound walls. So right now you don't have that.
So do we want that?
Oh yes, we do. Yes. As Sean was saying, the more we can provide detailed standards for applicants, the better off we are.
Right.
So did we finish that final implementation measure?
I believe so.
Yes, you did. It's time for a motion.
Are you? All right, committee, we are at the point where we've gone through our goals, objectives, policies, and implementation measures.
And glossary definitions.
But those, I think, have we approved the glossary? I think with the exception of site coverage.
Of site coverage,
Which we
yes.
just did. Okay. So the motion would include the glossary as well.
Specifically the glossary for site coverage, since you already approved the glossary without it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Mary Beth
And
is
there's a
wordsmithing.
hand up as well. Not sure who it is.
Go ahead, Randy.
Okay. I would like to make a motion, but I'll like Carol to help craft that motion. based upon what you've been discussing so far with the committee's work on this. Carol, could you do that?
I'm going to work with Mary here, get something pulled together. Give me just a second here.
Okay.
So what I have, if you will accept, or you can amend, this is a motion of the General Plan Update Land Use Committee to forward our recommendations for land use goals, policies, objectives, and implementation measures, and glossary definitions of site coverage, structures, and site coverage total, relative to our committee's assignment and is modified by today's meeting.
Sounds good.
Well
Miguel?
said, Randy.
That's my motion.
So we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Oh, looks like there's a hand up.
Miguel?
Miguel?
Yeah, I had a question on 100% site coverage from the shed to shed. Does that mean the existing parking lots could then be built upon?
That would have to be determined when you do the design standards, Miguel. All the implementation measure says is we're going to look for that within those areas to see if it makes sense or not. But there's no requirement. It's not a policy of the city to do that, and nor is it a mandatory thing in the land use element. It's just an idea to look at.
Thank you.
Okay, there was a motion.
I can second.
Can we have roll call, please?
Okay, Randy Elder,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Jan Clark Kretz,
Yes.
and Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ooh. Whoa.
Hey, thank you. I wanted to let you know that the process now is your staff is going to consolidate all of the committee's recommendations into a single document. Once it gets into a single document, we're going to review it for consistency and format. And then we will be delivering this to the Planning Commission and the Town Council. Your next job as a Town Council and a Planning Commission is to look at it, have public hearings on it, and determine if this is a document that you want to carry forward with the environmental document. So right now, we're hoping to have something to the Council and Planning Commission in May so that we can meet in May and move forward with the process.
Okay. Yeah, so now we're going to move on to recommendations for high-density residential sites. Mary Beth?
Certainly. At this time, included in your agenda package is a land use diagram that Christy put together. It has suggested sites for residential high-density parcels to meet HCD requirements. There are blue dots on it that relate specifically to church properties, because we've had one church site that came forward about senior housing on their site. So at this time, we'd like your input and considerations. What we're looking for is 2.2 acres. And Christy has a bunch of information relative to these parcels. So Christy, are you available?
Yes. I'm not muted, right? Okay.
No, you're good.
So as Mary Beth mentioned, this map shows different sites that various subcommittees of various members of the public and even some landowners have made suggestions on for these properties as becoming that residential high density site that's needed to meet our HCD requirements. So we have a deficit of 35 units, which equates to roughly 2.2 acres of land that we need to identify for redesignation as RH, residential high density. So you'll see on this map that these larger blue circles are suggested areas. And even there are some in the south area. And then these smaller dots that are in purple are church sites. This is the church site that made a request for some affordable housing. And these other sites are just the identification of church sites in general in the town. And as you'll see, there are some in the industrial area where any type of housing would not be appropriate. So what we need to do as a committee is identify some sites that you think you would want to recommend to the Planning Commission for a change to RH. So I'm just going to dive right in, and I think we should talk about this site right here, Heritage Park, first. So Heritage Park
Christy, could I interrupt just for a little bit? Because
Sure.
while we're looking for the deficit today, we also want a list of sites that in the future, say if the Hidden Grove project comes through and does not provide affordable housing and we have to provide housing, then it would be nice to have in our hip pocket potential sites to look at. So one of the things I would like this committee to do is look at the sites that have been identified by the other committees. And if there are any you say, absolutely not, it should never be here, let's get those off the map. But this could be hanging around for the next 8 years as development occurs. So it would be helpful. Plus, within the environmental document we'll be writing, then we can begin to evaluate the potential sites and reduce the future need for environmental documentation if we have that. So it's critical. Are there additional sites that we should consider? And are there sites that should absolutely be removed from this map?
And from Hidden Grove, how many units right now do they have identified as high density, or how much are we identifying?
It's at almost 7 acres. So Christy, I
It's
can't recall.
140 units.
140 units.
That's what HCD will allow us to consider for that site.
And also recently, and just kind of in addition, and this is coming in late, but about a week ago, we got an email from a property owner in the area of Burg Lane. And is that something that we're going to consider, or is that kind of a site that is a no for some reason?
So it's
Or is
noted
it-
here, right in this circle. It's these two parcels right here. So we will talk about that. We'll discuss it. It's on the list.
Thank you.
Sorry about interrupting, but I thought we needed to know the parameters of what we're doing here.
Right.
All right, Christy. Go
So
for it.
Heritage Park. One thing maybe to preface this is there's the Surplus Lands Act of 2019. So this is a California law that requires local agencies that are disposing of surplus land to give first priority to affordable housing. So that allows local agencies to write down the cost of the land to provide additional subsidy for affordable housing purposes. And HCD tracks surplus land through the town's APR. They're looking. They know what sites are surplus and what are eligible sites for that. And DGS even has a GIS map of potential sites, although they don't list any in Loomis, interestingly. So moving on to the Heritage Park site. So this is a town-owned surplus site. It has been divided into multiple lots, and those lots range from about 1/10 of an acre to maybe 4/10 of an acre. And then the area where the pond is set outside of those lots. It's a separate parcel. So there are various groupings of the lots. There's some that are sort of down here by the freeway. There's another grouping that's up here in this area. So if the town were to take groups of those lots, so say 24 lots near the freeway, or 15 lots up in this upper corner area on the north end of the site, both of those clusters of lots would each allow for just over 2.2 acres. And then the remainder of Heritage Park could also be left as a residential medium high density and park area if you want to retain that pond area for a park. So there's room to work with the Heritage Park site. You can set aside all of it. You could set aside some of it or none of it. It's up to the committee to recommend what you think about that.
Can I chime in on that as well? So from staff's perspective, from my perspective, it makes the most sense to put it onto that Heritage Park site because we own it. It's a 40 lot subdivision right now. It's a paper subdivision. So the town can't sell that without making it available to affordable housing anyway under the Surplus Land Act. And then on top of that, we can't revert it back to acreage because if we do, we have to designate another area to accommodate that 40 unit loss. So to me, it makes 100% sense to put it there. That's the only place in town that we can guarantee that affordable housing will be built because we own the property and we'll be able to control what is built there. If we put it on any other property in town that the town has known, we can't guarantee that it'll be built as affordable housing. It could be built as market rate apartments. So that's staff's recommendation. And I don't want to short circuit the conversation because we do need to talk about the other sites. But in terms of addressing the shortfall that we have now, that's staff's recommendation. It's also listed in the housing element as a potential site. So it has already been identified.
Thank you, Sean. We have a public comment. Ramona, actually, she's our auxiliary member.
Just to clarify, that's 2.3 acres, I think is what you said, but how many units are we talking about that would need to identify as high density?
2.2 acres and 35 units.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to do public comment?
Yeah, whenever
Okay.
able to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Gary Liss, 4395 Gold Trail Way. I haven't studied all the materials. My apologies for that. I was on the housing task force for the general plan, so have familiarity and did discuss the Heritage Park site in particular during the housing element discussions that Sean just referenced. Consultant just noted that you could use some clustered areas at Heritage Park for meeting the 2.2 acres, 35 dwelling units requirements for arena, and that you could also leave the rest for residential high-density housing or as a park. So I'd like to comment that although I'm a strong advocate for leaving it as both open park and open space, during the housing element, I was also a champion for affordable housing and particularly housing that our residents need, our seniors, our young families, our starter families, people who have kids that will have to leave town once they get out of Del Oro, teachers, firefighters. There's a whole list in the housing element of the key constituencies that need low-cost housing, whether you call it affordable, whether you call it something else. I'm a strong advocate for not trying to meet arena numbers as our sole priority. Our priority should be meeting our housing needs in our land use designations. With that as background, I support, at the urging of Mr. Rabe, the use of 2.2 acres at Heritage Park for affordable housing, preferably seniors only. I believe that the fact that it's town-owned, it puts it in the best position of actually developing it as affordable housing to meet our needs, not necessarily the RENA numbers. But I would ask that the rest of it be left as park and open space. That's the type of direction that Sean, Mr. Rabe, and I had discussed previously. And we had agreed that there are multiple needs. The general plan addresses balancing those multiple needs. And it seems like the Heritage Park use for 2.2 acres for preferably senior-only affordable housing, and the rest being designated clearly as open space and parks would be the most appropriate way to proceed with that. I would also urge that you consider the maximum number of sites now to be included, not just meeting the 2.2 acre requirement, as was suggested earlier, because I'm not confident that the Grove will provide us with affordable housing as opposed to market rate. The former project, the village there was not going to do anything but market rate. There's no reason to think that they will do something differently unless Mr. Rabé becomes an amazing negotiator and surprises us with pulling something out of the hat. So I think it's prudent for us to have at least the numbers that we need to meet if the Grove doesn't come through. And along those lines, the church sites in particular are ones that, to me, have probably a better chance of actually happening, because those who are involved with churches are more actively involved in having a social consciousness and are more likely to care for those who can't afford market rate properties and want to do something for the community. So I would urge that all the church sites be included, and the maximum number of sites be included in order to spread the pain around the entire city, and not just spread the pain, but diversify our town. I believe that having a diversity of incomes, of cultures, of experiences, of religions is what we should stand for. That's should be part of what a general plan is calling for. And in this day and age, I'm a member of the Jedi Council for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion of the National Recycling Coalition, and I feel strongly that in light of Black Lives Matter and all the things that have happened in this country, we have an obligation ourselves to do better at providing those opportunities for our residents to be enriched by that diversity. I think that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Did we have? We have.
Question. Does the state allow you just to partition a piece of land? I'm sorry. As Jesse Lunsford, I'm sorry, 613 Smokewood Court. Sorry about that. Does the state allow you to partition it as senior housing only?
No, you're looking at a land use designation, and we don't have a senior land use designation for housing.
But because the town owns the property, and when I go to market it to affordable housing developers, that'll be the first group that we're trying to attract to that site, is senior housing.
Then, as most of you know, I'm a big fan of senior affordable housing.
Right.
And when I look at senior affordable housing, I'm looking at 500 to 600 square feet per one bedroom. So now you can cluster more houses on an acre, and it'll take care of your state requirement now of the number of units. Was it 188 we owe to low and very low income housing?
I'd ask Christy on that. Exactly.
There's 188 total.
Right. So now with that 11 acre parcel, 5 acres is part of the wetlands. You can now get your 1 acre park. That's a passive park, no lawns, only benches, only picnic tables. You keep the pond, you get your park, and now we can take care of all of our affordable housing under senior. It also helps the town because you're taking away the traffic issues. Seniors, I'm a senior, so I'm not insulted. We don't drive during commute hours. So being off a major artery, we're not going to interfere with your traffic to school and your traffic to your jobs. So that's a big plus. Plus the lower cost for seniors for police services. We help in that regard, and it leaves police services open for others. So between the police, traffic, allowing the park to exist and the wetlands to exist, I think that land should move toward affordable housing and senior affordable housing, where we can put 30 units easily of 500, 600 square foot houses for seniors without having to go two-story. Other towns have done it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. Did somebody have their hand up?
Randy.
Randy, go ahead, Randy.
Oh, I just wanted to thank Mr. List for his pontifications regarding his worldview.
Miguel, are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Right now, it's a standard subdivision with the lots ranging, I think, from 5,000 to 7,000 square feet, and I believe there's close to 40 lots. If that was redone to smaller lots, let's say 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, you could probably get a significant amount more of housing in there. I think the whole site should be utilized for housing. To just take a couple acres and make it high density, I don't think is the right way to do it. I think everybody would like to have a small home there that fits into the neighborhood. So I would strongly suggest that the total site be developed with a small park if necessary. But you could redesign that down and probably get, what is there now, 40, you could probably get 60 units in there if it was redesigned. Also, while I'm still on here, I'd like you to consider the church site on King Road. There's about a couple acres on King Road that would be ideal for this type of housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Miguel.
Can I just point out two things responding to some of the comments? So the first is with what Gary was talking about. If we place a designation over the remaining portion of that property to have it be open space, then we need to find and redesignate an additional density somewhere else to accommodate that loss, because you can't have a net loss. So I wouldn't, and I mean, this is kind of getting like way down the road, right? But I don't think we would want to strip away the lots that are there just with the understanding that they're never going to be built. Because if we, which I probably shouldn't be saying on recording, but if we redesignate it and revert it to acreage and put a designation over it to be open space, then we have to redesignate somewhere else that loss, which, and I don't know what that is, but it doesn't qualify under the, it would be the like probably medium income requirement or whatever that is. So we'd have to find additional space to upzone basically and increase density. So that was one thing. And Miguel was talking about building smaller houses, smaller lots. That would take a general plan amendment, a zoning amendment, and the state won't give us credit for the high density RENA stuff that we need to build unless it's being built to the required density per acreage, which is 25 units per acre. So I agree that it would be better to build smaller homes and on that property probably than building an apartment building. I think that's what everybody would want to do. But in terms of trying to resolve this issue that we have of finding additional high density housing sites, that wouldn't resolve that, and we would be in the same position that we're in now, trying to find an additional site.
Okay, committee back, coming round the circle, back around. Is anybody in disagreement with having Heritage Oaks as our choice?
I am.
I'm sorry.
I had some questions about the surplus land kind of thing. Now, we don't have the map in front of us, but as I recall, there are already the plot for Heritage Park. As I recall, there were certain, the lots are already numbered and designated. Is that correct, Christy?
They are split up. So if you were to go to the assessor's parcel maps, you can see that there are individual small lots along these roadways that have been that are shown right here. So as I had mentioned, there's some that are along the freeway, and then there's clusters coming all the way up to here. So it's sort of in this area, with this area and this area being open.
So when I asked Sean, why should we do Heritage Park, he brought up the Surplus Land Act. And I said, because I'd asked him, why can't we do this later, choosing these because we have technically until September of 2024. I went back and looked at the records. And he said, it was in large part because we need to do it now so that we can get this included in the general plan EIR. So my question is, if we designate, I assume, certain parcels that would accumulate to the 2.2, that gets looked at for this general plan, then if somebody wanted to develop it and said, that's really, I'm willing to do the affordable housing that you need on 2.2 acres, but that's not the best place. Does there have to be a new EIR done if that's changed to a different set of parcels?
If the parcels change, yes, you would have to have environmental documentation on the new parcels that are being, anytime you do a general plan change or a land use diagram change, you have to do environmental documentation. And the state doesn't let you get by with a categorical exemption. You have to do it, I believe at minimum, and I don't know if Mark is on, but I'd be a minimum of a mitigated neg deck, but it does require an EIR of some sort.
Well, let's I don't want to step on your tongue at all, Andy, but lately the state has been accepting addendums, things like that. And Gene, the standard answer to all planning questions, particularly environmental questions, is that it depends. It really depends on where they're going and what they're going to do. It's entirely possible that if they wanted to move to a different site within the area that was evaluated, if they're still using the same roadways and still using the same general design configuration, just in a different location on that property, as Andy correctly points out, you'll have to do some environmental analysis, but it may not be much more than a few pages of description saying the impacts really haven't changed.
Okay, so maybe a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration would work without a whole big EIR?
Yeah, it could even be an addendum, which is even less than those two.
If it's done within Heritage Park that we have designated already. So if
as long as you're not going outside of there, yeah.
Right.
If you go outside the designated area, then you have to take a look at the area you're designating.
Now, if something comes up as a better site in town, either instead of or in addition to this, let's say that Hidden Grove doesn't do all of it or does some of it or none of it, and then we have to find some, then we're obviously not probably going to designate all that kind of thing tonight because we don't know. So then if that happens, then we would have to do additional EIR work wherever that should be.
And that's correct. That's the reason we have all these sites identified. And if they're potential sites, we don't have to designate them as this is the site. We're saying these are potential sites that we want to evaluate in the future if we need sites. But this EIR for the general plan, once we identify those, can say and evaluate those, which then significantly reduces the cost and time to designate those in the future. So we do not have to designate them at tonight's meeting, but our recommendation is identify the sites in the town of Loomis that have the potential and remove the sites that you do not want to be high density, but have a pocket of sites in your back pocket. We'll evaluate them in this EIR, and then it gives the town great flexibility in the future.
So we're only looking at potential in those designations other than whatever we will be doing specifically the 2.2, whatever we do for that, but the others are potential, but we're not putting a land use designation on them at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
It just makes the process easier in the future if you have some backup plans ready.
I would say as far as Heritage Park, I think, and I'm assuming from this that we don't have to designate the whole thing just because it's surplus land. If we do, they're not telling us we have to do the whole thing. What are you allowed to do? What are the rules on that? As long as you do what? How much do you have to do on the Surplus Land Act?
Under the Surplus Land Act, I'm not sure, but for
Yeah.
arena, we need a minimum of 2.2 acres. And my recommendation is designated, and since the town owns it and the town will control what happens on the site, that the town then will control what actually occurs. So my recommendation is designate the site for your 25 units per acre, and then the town would negotiate a developer to come in and build whatever is appropriate.
I'm asking about the rest of it.
The rest of it would just stay under the ownership of the town. So we would sell, we would designate one parcel or two or however many we need to designate specific to meet the requirement that we need, the 2.2 acres. So designate one parcel, two parcels, whatever that number is to meet that requirement, and then maintain the ownership of the rest of it. And then down the road, if we decide, if we have additional RENA needs that we need to put somewhere, if the town at that point, the town meaning the town, not staff and not whatever, but the town through the process that we follow, needs to if they decide to designate part of a heritage park, we can continue to just chip away at it if we needed to. I wouldn't want to do that because you don't want to build all of your affordable housing in one spot like that. If we can help it, it'd be better to spread it around. But for at this point in time, meeting the requirements that we need to meet, it makes sense to put it there to me.
I guess the question I'm asking is, are we free to do something else with the rest of it if we wanted to?
Sure.
So Surplus Land Act is not going to say, you still own this and you have to offer up more of it for affordable housing?
No, well, if we sold it to a developer, we would. But if the town kept it and then developed it ourselves, we wouldn't need to because we're not selling it. So the question becomes, does the town have the capacity to become a developer? And I think the answer to that is no. If we were looking at selling it, we would need to follow the Surplus Land Act and make it available to affordable housing first. The way that it works is you do affordable housing first. If there's no takers for that, then you can actually turn it into, sell it to, or transition it to some sort of a recreational use. So open space parks would be a good way to do that. But considering the need for affordable housing throughout the state, the likelihood is that we would find somebody that would want to build on whatever we were looking to sell.
So there's not much possibility of using some of it for affordable housing and the rest of it putting in smaller home subdivisions? Is that what we're getting? Is that the situation?
We could do that. So for example, like Mercy Housing, right? Mercy Housing built an affordable housing project in Jackson in Emery County that does not look like an affordable housing project at all. It's not an apartment. This is back like in the early 2000s. So it's different now. The density requirements aren't the same. But Mercy built basically little cottages. So sort of what Miguel was talking about, that are, I don't know if they're duplexes or if they're just single family set-alones, but they're like maybe like 800, 900 square feet at the most. And those are constantly full. From the time that I was growing up, they were full, and everybody wanted to move in there when you were a kid, a student, because you couldn't afford to live anywhere else, and it was impossible to get in there. And it looks really, really nice. It looks like kind of like a park setting with a bunch of trees and stuff. You would not be able to tell that was built by an affordable housing developer at all. So if we were able to partner with somebody like Mercy, have them do the 25 units per acre on an apartment complex that we need to do because of RENA, but then also build smaller lots, they might be willing to do that because that's a little bit more marketable for them, obviously, and they'd be able to cobble together funding for that probably easier than they would for just, a 2.2 acre affordable housing site. I think that all that stuff would come down the road, depending on what a developer partner that the town would have would we'd have to talk about that and figure out what they need. If we are going to increase density through there, though, we would need to do a general plan amendment and a zoning amendment, because the lots now are single family lots, and I don't know what sizes they are, but they're certainly far too big to accommodate, you know, an 800 square foot house. You'd be able to put 5 or 6 of them on there. So, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't do that.
Right. To Sean's point, I mean, the affordable housing financing is so complicated, and oftentimes the nonprofits will need to have a mix of the affordable and the market rate to be able to make the financing work, to offset the affordable.
I mean, can you imagine how, if we had 30 of those 900 square foot houses available that are single family, even if they were duplexes, right? Like 30 of those or something, if we built along that road and like by the berm, kind of, so it's not encroaching into the pond area, but we're building like a little community there, that I think those houses would be full constantly.
Mm-hmm. They would be. We have is it Randy?
Right. So what other areas are we considering for high density affordable?
Okay, so if you look at this map, we have, most of them are clustered in the center here. So there were suggestions for the tourist destination sites. There were suggestions in the general commercial that's at the south end of Taylor Road. There were suggestions for this particular parcel off of Brace here, and then also the parcels by the sheriff's station. A landowner in the Burg Lane area suggested their parcel and the neighboring parcel. And someone made a suggestion about the Gervasoni parcel that we talked about earlier, where Alice's Fruit Shed is. And then there were comments about placing it near Rockland. So where we butt up against Rockland on the south end here. So off of Rockland Road by Sierra College, and the apartments that would be going in over in that area. And then also down here at the south end, where there is senior housing along Sierra College Boulevard in Rockland. And then also on the property at the corner of Rockland and Barton, there was a suggestion made there.
So could we go back to the Taylor Road properties?
Sure.
Number 4?
Yes.
Isn't that the KOA?
So there is the mobile homes in this area, and then you have, I believe this is already developed with the Taylor Road mixed use. So this area was suggested, but there isn't really a vacant site that's available in there.
So that's really out of play, right?
Yes, yeah. And then if you go up on this area, there's 2 parcels right here, and those parcels appear to be vacant or highly underutilized. So those total just under 1 acre together. Those are off of Sean Way right there.
Right.
So that's another area that's been suggested. I don't know how the committee feels about those sites.
Well, my opinion would be to keep the high density affordable as close to the downtown as we can. I'm not particularly keen on moving it out towards the boundary with Rockland on the south, but that may work. And then if you go up North Taylor, past King, past Del Oro, there's the old Lemus property, I think you referenced, which is currently GC, correct?
Right, and the committee had discussed this as becoming an residential medium density, so mimicking this area over here.
And that's Legacy Park next to it.
Yeah.
So that may not be a good fit. I'm with Sean, Mr. Robet, pardon me, for trying to build some inventory here. I think that for future high density uses, and I'm looking at the map, I'm not sure we have, in addition to Heritage Park, I'm not sure what we really have in that downtown area or along Taylor Road. So I'm looking to the committee for thoughts that maybe the committee has on this, and the chairwoman.
Well, thank you, Randy. I tend to agree. I am all for Heritage Park being a great choice for us. And I feel like, it has 11 acres and we have a real good potential there to get some real various types of housing there that fit the needs of Loomis, not necessarily Rena, because that's ultimately the most important thing. I believe that none of these sites, high-density sites, should be in the rural areas at all. So I wouldn't even consider any of them other than the church. I know the church there's some church potential there, but the church parcel is small. I believe it's 5 acres, and that is the one right there. Yeah. They are working with a nonprofit to see what they can do. That parcel, it's a great idea and it's wonderful, but I do believe that it also has a lot of hills on that parcel too. Not that I'm getting into the weeds, but I don't think we should put any high density at all in our rural areas. It has to be in the downtown core, right by the freeway. So that's my 2 cents.
Also, does it make it any sense to designate an area for high density if we have an unwilling landowner? Because we have one lot, and that's, it is in the agriculture area, the southernmost portion that we've looked at for many years, because it will be adjacent to all those high density apartments in Rockland. However, those property owners have never been willing to sell. So we would probably scratch it on that basis, I guess.
I think on that point, it's important to distinguish between property owners who've affirmatively said they would never ever sell it and have no interest in it versus property owners who haven't really given an opinion on that. If it's somebody who's saying we absolutely won't sell it, that could get into the showing the likelihood of it developing as affordable, and that's actually currently being litigated in the Bay Area. So I wouldn't want to hang my hat on just sites where you've got property owners that are saying absolutely never will I ever put high density affordable housing here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the case on that one lot I was just talking about.
Actually, I think it's actually several owners, and they talked to us before, and they were very, very upset that they were even on a list for consideration.
Right.
And they want to stay rural. They're in the RA, and they had less than no interest at all. They were totally against, rather than even
So
neutral.
We could scratch that site probably.
Yeah, so Christy, let's start from the back, go back to the beginning. We have the Heritage Park. And does anybody disagree that would be one of our recommendations? Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. And so then, do you have these numbered?
No, not particularly. So if we just want to just tell me the area you're talking about.
Let's start at the bottom then, or wherever you want to go. Then it sounds like that oval area is out.
That's out. And how about this area up here?
Anybody in favor of having that?
No.
I would say no.
Okay.
I think the only thing is if the church came forward, we would certainly entertain what proposal they might have. But I don't want to designate it or have it on our queue to try to.
Yeah.
Well,
that has to come from them.
On that particular site, because it is the church, and also that particular area, Rockland Road, is just such obvious access to the freeway out of Loomis without having to go through Loomis. And that's my thought on that site.
The church is actually moving forward. I'm on their email weekly newsletter, and so they did have a meeting again last week with their consultant, and they have a 3-year contract with was it Christian something Homes to look into this and see if it's viable. And they are meeting again, I think April 5th. And the Christian Churches Homes group has hired an architect for them to look at the site. So they are seriously interested, but as Jan or Bonnie pointed out, they're on a slope. the upper part where the church building is and the Head Start are flatter, but then there's a slope. So I don't know how well that works out. And if we're trying to preserve the rural look of things, they would have to work at something that would, kind of fit in the best they could, but they are obviously still very interested in it. And it's,
So would we then want to include that as a potential site? Just the church site?
I would.
Just the church.
maybe put it on the
Okay.
future considerations
Yeah,
list.
so everybody's in agreement then? Yes?
Are you in agreement on all the church site or this one
No,
specifically?
we're
Okay.
starting down here at the bottom.
The one on Rockland Road there.
Yeah,
So
just the
now-
church.
Okay, so then now go north.
Okay. So then there's a few church sites here, but then we're looking at that tourist destination commercial area. So that was a suggestion made by a member of the public, that some of it could be located in that area.
And that's a big question mark, right, Christie?
Yes, yeah, and there's no particular parcel that was suggested. It was just a general suggestion that that would be, a commercial area, and perhaps having higher density housing near that commercial development would be appropriate.
Right, right.
I know when we talked about that, though, with that land use subcommittee, I mean, they were pretty clear that they felt that it really needed to be focused on the commercial. I mean, if a housing could be mixed, I mean, certainly something to entertain, but I don't know that I would be focused on it for the residential. I don't think that would be my top priority.
Anybody disagree with that?
No.
Okay, so it looks like those areas will not be recommended by us.
All right. And then just moving towards the west, we'll go to this site right here. This is a suggestion about the parcels located by the sheriff's station. These are developed, so I don't see that having a ton of potential of people wanting to change over, but
If
do you
it's
want to
already-
entertain that?
If it's already developed.
Are we talking about the little corner one right up what is usually real
I'm
estate
talking about
office?
by Rayleigh's, across from Rayleigh's.
Right.
Right where
On the freeway side of the sheriff's office, where it's mainly parking lot and a little building, or someplace else?
Any of those areas, if
It's a general suggestion?
yeah, there wasn't a suggestion for one particular parcel. It was, parcels in this area. These are smaller parcels, so you would need a lot more than just one to be viable.
Oh,
We have a train coming through. Hold on.
I think that was presented to us at one of the committee meetings several months ago, maybe a long time ago. And I think it's just a small strip of lots. And it was recommended and entertained. And I don't know, it was just kind of put to the side without any final decision. But I think that's the area that we were looking at with some favorability. That doesn't mean that we want to stay at that, but isn't that right, Sean? Didn't we look at that?
I honestly don't recall. I mean, those lots are all pretty shallow and accessed right off of Horseshoe Bar Road for, that's a little.
Yeah, okay.
They're not, those lot, if the lots were deeper instead of like longish, then it would be different, but with them not being very deep and then the access off of Horseshoe Bar, that'd be pretty tough.
Yeah.
And we need a half acre minimum, right?
Yes, yes.
How big is it was once the proposed Chinese restaurant site. I don't even know how big that parcel is.
So these parcels in here range from about a fifth of an acre, so like 0.2 or 0.18 to a half acre.
And you say they are developed though, or is there some empty lots?
There might be here and there, but most of it looks to be occupied by a structure of some sort.
Right.
So it looks like it's not enough land and it is in an awkward area. So does anybody disagree with taking that off our proposal list?
For a site to qualify, it doesn't have to be vacant land.
Okay. Thank you, Andreas.
I was thinking about that little building, you know, the office building that's been real estate, various things. It's the kind of thing, if somebody wanted to really develop there, that kind of building probably would go. But if there are other reasons not to put that on the list, then that's okay.
All right, what's next, Christy?
So we can go up here. Did you want to consider, we had talked about this one being RM. Did you want to, any ideas of changing your mind and recommending high density up on the Alice's fruit stand parcel?
And we're just making a list for, you know, kind of backups should Hidden Groves not come through. Honestly, I've been driving down Taylor quite extensively the past couple weeks, with that one being closely located to Del Oro, and then not that far from Loomis Grammar. And that stretch of Taylor Road is actually looks like it's been, you know, updated significantly, and it comes off of Penryn. That one actually would make some sense. You know, and again, I think just to remind everyone, high density doesn't necessarily mean the, you know, technical affordable housing. I mean, I've lived in some pretty fancy schmancy apartments that were high density, that were really nice, you know, with the clubs and the pools and those sorts of things.
But if we designated high density and it isn't used for affordable housing, doesn't that leave us back in the same ballpark of having to keep
We're not
playing?
designating, these are just kind of in queue in case we need some.
So my recommendation is you've already suggested that the medium density residential be on that site. In this case, you would just say, in the future, should we need a site, this is one of the sites we will consider in looking at all potential sites at that moment in time. And let me tell you, because of the economy and everything else, the sites that you think may be good today may not be good a year from now. So it's just a list. These are things we want to look at. These are things, no, do not look at them. So it's just a list of where should we look.
I think that should stay on the list. I think there's some of the things you brought up, the access, the schools being nearby. Those are certainly assets that would be favorable to that kind of housing.
Points, because I know, you know, Heritage Oaks, that definitely does make sense for senior housing because it's not there's not a really good circulation to the schools, and so it really wouldn't make sense for a lot of kids that would, you know, want to be close to schools and that sort of thing. And then I know that the church is also considering senior, and so I'm just thinking about where can our young families with children that might be, you know, just kind of starting out in their lives. Oh, sorry, now I'm doing it. Sorry, team.
One of my considerations on the Alice's site was, well, I feel like we've already told this guy, you know, that's and decided. So I'm not opposed to putting it on the, you know, the future maybe list. But when I was looking at that for higher density, I kept thinking of all the traffic problems that we already have. And if we're putting higher density up there, that's not the most walkable place for people to go to shop downtown in Rayleigh's. And if we've got a whole lot of dense driving from right into Del Oro and Loomis Grammar right at the same time, people trying to go to work at the same time, that we've already got traffic jams on Taylor, I was thinking that probably is a negative consideration.
I think access tends to be up to Penryn though, because once you get up to that point, Penryn would make more sense to.
Well, what does the committee think? Randy, do you want to put this spot in as a potential spot? What's your thought?
Next to Legacy Lane?
Yes.
No.
No? How about Eugene? Bonnie?
I'm a yes.
Greg?
I'm a yes.
I guess yours are auxiliary, huh? Does it?
Yeah, I'm an
But I still
auxiliary.
value your
That's not a
opinion.
vote, though. That was just a polling.
I'm bullying. And am I missing myself? Okay, I'm kind of thinking no, and the only reason I think that is, I don't think the people in Legacy Lane would like to have higher density right there, and I kind of agree with the traffic. I'm not entirely opposed, but I feel like the neighbors would not like that.
The only point is if you wanted to put it in the core, which was discussed earlier, to keep the higher density in the core center away from the rural areas, that then meets that criteria. So, and anywhere in the core, you can have the same traffic problem.
So,
Greg, you're the one that was the moderator last time we had the
Oh, I remember that
the
meeting.
groups from Legacy Lane when
No.
when some higher density was proposed, not anything even
It
like
was,
apartments.
wasn't even high density. It was just
No.
medium
Right.
lots. I
I'm
know,
just
no.
saying you'll get to moderate that one again.
I'll be gone by then.
so does that give you direction on that property?
So I'm hearing not a recommendation.
Correct.
Okay. So we'll skip down. This site was also suggested. It looks like there is a house on this site, but it is about 4 acres. So on Brace next to the freeway.
So who had their hand up? Miguel, go ahead. Miguel, unmute if you can.
Yeah, that site you're looking there on Brace, every time you go by it, you see a subdivision map. So I think it's been subdivided, or apparently there's a tentative subdivision map on that parcel. It would be maybe a good location though for what you're looking for. I'm just curious if it's already subdivided as a subdivision, and it's sat there for at least 10 years with that sign out there. Thanks.
Mary Beth?
That's across the street. He's talking about across the street.
Oh, is that? This is the one that has horses. Oh, that's Charlie's property. Charlie West. I don't believe that's his residence. Yeah. Dottie?
Hi, I just wanted to let you know that is Charlie's property. That's Charlie West. And he backs up to a family residential area that I'm not sure. I can guarantee you they'd be in your office if you tried to put high density behind them. So I just wanted you to know that is Charlie, and please don't come here. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheryl? Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, I agree with Dottie. They're going to be in your office if you try to put that there. Those people on Hunter Oaks are going to have a little fit. And it will bring more traffic, and you're already proposing a great deal of traffic for us. I would not support that.
Thank you. Randy, go ahead.
I agree with Dottie. And Cheryl, that no, that's too far removed from downtown area to the connections. No, we should not do that.
Okay. It looks like, is anybody in disagreement with that? I can totally see that should not be included personally, but is anybody in disagreement of that? Okay, let's take it off then.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I think, we really need to be looking at the circulation issues, because I think that is going to be our biggest limitation and challenge on where we put any increase density.
Okay. Going back to Taylor Road, and this general commercial right in here, are there any thoughts about that site?
How many lots were vacant and how big were they?
I think there's about 2 lots and they're each roughly a half acre. Not quite equaling 1 acre total.
I think that makes sense.
Is that the one on Raymond Lane?
It's near Sean Way, so
I think that's Raymond Lane.
Is that?
Yeah, it's a long parcel or two, right? Yeah, I think that's Raymond Lane, and that might be a good fit.
Christy, can you blow up your exhibit?
Yes. It doesn't have the road name on it, but I believe
it goes back in Tudor.
It goes to Tudor,
Right.
yes.
I think it's Sean Way, and I think it's the other half of the Spec West property. And then
Right.
there's another lot
Yeah.
along Sean behind.
I think Bank of America is kind of near there too.
Bank of America is over here, and then this is on the south side of Sean Way.
Yeah, doesn't seem like that's a half an acre to me.
Each of them would be half an acre. So together, these 2 parcels, they're right here and here. Together, they make almost an acre.
Yeah, it's close to Taylor Road mixed use. So it would kind of fit or blend from that point of view.
But I would be in favor of that being included in the inventory.
Okay, anybody disagree? What was what? Second? The
church
the church.
property.
Yeah, I think nobody's disagreeing, so we'll include that spot.
Okay. And then that brings us to this last area right here, Burg Lane. So property owner, it's this parcel here and then this parcel here. The property owner suggested, since the town needs some high density, why not put it there? So these 2 sites, I'm trying to find where I have my notes for that. They're about 9.4 acres in total. So 2 parcels, each are roughly 4.5 acres. So one's 4.5, one's 4.9 acres. They are currently RR, so rural residential. Let me pan out a little so you can see what's around there.
That seems, yeah, that does.
See, I think if you think about all the arguments why we didn't put high density houses in the business park area, those same reasons will apply to that area, which was, traffic, you can't, there's no additional access across the railroad. It would all have to go down out Saunders by the church there, out to Webb and into town. And that'd be an awful lot of houses to put that way.
Especially on those roads back there. That would require substantial improvement.
Yeah, otherwise, I think it's kind of a great area for a lot of reasons, but maybe not.
Yeah,
there you go.
So anybody disagree with not including that? And we do have a public comment. Who was that? Randy. Not a, sorry. Committee member. Extraordinaire.
I say don't include it.
Okay. Anybody disagree? Nope. Looks like we're not going to include that.
Okay.
Greg, is that where we had a Burg Lane subdivision once that has since expired?
We did. It was not nearly to that scope.
No.
It was just a couple houses, and there's some
houses,
rental houses down there, and low income. It's a low income area, but you're right. It was discussed for that before.
Any other circles, Christy?
So that takes care of our circles. It just leaves any church sites if you wanted to entertain anything other than the one we're talking about, where they have interest in doing that, and have made a presentation on that site.
There?
Has the Congregational Church expressed interest? Which,
Um,
that's the one on King next to the freeway?
No, so this one on Rockland Road's the only one that made an official statement, and the church at the corner of Barton and Rockland has shown interest. But that's it in terms of the church sites. None of the others have come forth as proposing to do that.
The old Priory site, though, we didn't discuss.
The Priory site off of Wells, it's just not in.
Where it just was.
The school and RR subdivision.
Oh.
Yeah, that's got a different project, has an eye on
Right.
that.
Gary may not know about that. The school, they want to build a charter school there with RR 1 acre parcels around it. And so the committee really didn't want to have to change it to RR and from the 4.6 RA. However, that kind of is a package deal to get the school there. And otherwise, kids go to Loomis Grammar, I understand, or more kids go to there.
So this was a suggested area for high density. We talked about a change to RR with the potential for a school site. So if you want to entertain that, we can discuss that.
I thought we had already decided not to include that.
Right.
Well, it's not.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and then we have a public comment, and I know Bonnie has something to say too.
I was just going to say, the church that Jean was referring to, the congregation that's off of King, I know that they would be interested, but they would like some assistance. But that one also makes sense because it's pretty close to Del Oro and Loomis Grammar. Again, I personally think we need to also be looking for sites for families instead of just seniors.
And just not to confuse, there is a church on King near Sierra College, and you're talking about the one on King near the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
Not the one that's over by Del Oro.
Yeah, this one right in here.
Right, by the freeway, yeah.
Right.
Miguel, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. That site that you're showing there, the church on King, that site's ideal for high density. There's 3 or 4 acres adjacent to it. And it's in a good location. And I think you should consider that as a future site. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think some of that acreage may not belong to the church, but be part of Hidden Grove, the top part of Hidden Grove too. But
Hidden Oaks?
If they're willing to be considered, I think it would be a good site.
Do we need to just add that in, or can you circle that, Christy, what they're talking about?
Yeah, I will do that.
There you go. Perfect.
It's right across from the Del Oro back parking lot.
Right.
So it's down, it's.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that's a great site.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other church sites to consider?
Can we, as a committee, perhaps send a recommendation that hopefully church sites could be considered, in the future, not as a global thing, but that, the idea is kind of started up and it seems like a really good idea. And so I don't know if that's our body's job to send up a recommendation like that, but by not including all the other churches, I don't want to send the message like we don't like the idea. I think that the idea is excellent, given the right parameters. So I don't know. And there's another hand up.
Well, I agree with you on that. I think we should be sensitive about offending any other churches who think we're not paying attention. And I think that we need to context it with respect to where densities most likely should occur. And also start a dialogue with the churches and see what their opinions are. Keep them engaged. And it can be worded in such a way to let them know that we're trying to respect their thoughts on this, at the same time do the right planning for the town of Loomis.
One of the things you may want to do as a motion is you have identified specific areas. But the other thing I heard you may want to put in a motion is that you want to focus in the future anything along the downtown corridor versus the rural areas or outer areas of town. And then you could also in that motion say that the town will consider the churches on a case-by-case basis, something to that effect, because I like the idea of, saying, hey, we don't want it out in the rural areas. So if these sites don't work and we have to look somewhere where we want to look along the downtown corridor is a place for housing.
Right.
I'm wondering too, if maybe we want to have something broader than this, the very high density. Maybe churches have other sorts of affordable housing sorts of projects that they would like to look into, and rather than apartment buildings. And so I think that it would be good if the town could let them know that we're interested in what they might be, might want to do, because I think a lot of churches do have an interest in helping, but either the site isn't suitable or they're really not going to be wanting to do apartment buildings. And for instance, the one on Rockland Road, that organization requires them to cede their property. So they probably would need to do a lot split to do it. A lot of places, I don't know that all organizations would require that for apartments, but if they did, then there are a lot of churches that are not going to be interested or able. But there might be other kinds of housing that they would be able to do. I don't know, tiny homes or some other kinds of things that are coming up, coming along.
I think you could frame it as something like town supports the churches looking at developing housing to address the state's housing crisis on a case-by-case basis, and just leave it broad like that rather than drilling down to tiny homes, because who knows, in 2 years we might have who knows what's going to get proposed that. So but leaving it as supporting housing that will address the state's housing crisis that fits their what they do as churches, right? So for what it's worth.
And I think just getting into details about the kind of alternatives to just apartments is also something we can look at when we get into the implementation measures around affordable housing more broadly, not just with respect to churches, but anybody who's looking to build affordable housing in town. We should make it known that the town is interested in a diversity of affordable housing options.
Yeah.
Good
I
point.
like the way that's worded. I kind of wouldn't like to see the state's housing crisis in our motion, because I really believe that we as a town have our own needs for housing, and these are what is going to fit the needs of our town. So, all right, so we're at the point now where we need to perhaps have a motion to accept the properties as just recommendations.
I wanted to ask about one more, Mary Beth, that subdivision that was at Brace and Stone, and it was a subdivision, and then they came back and didn't want a subdivision. They wanted it put back into larger lots. Or was that before you came?
That was before I came, but Carolyn shared that.
Is there any possibility? I was thinking about if there were single-family homes on Brace and Stone, back from Stone, would there be room for some denser housing back there?
Yeah, Carol, what was the story on that? There was a difference of what it currently is and what it could be. Right. Like there's existing homes, there's like one that you couldn't do a plus
It's also an area to consider the, I mean, it was before, and then there was a lot of back and
Is that
forth, and
here,
it
Jean?
did kind of go away. You're right, Jean. But it's also,
Bigger lots again.
yeah, they wanted the bigger lots. They didn't want to quite go so small.
Is that right here?
And isn't that area the area that feeds into the back part of Heritage Park?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's-
Residential medium. Is cul-de-sac back here?
And you know, we did have, isn't that Petkus Brothers? Yes, it was, it's the lands of Petkus. And they did approach us here recently to discuss if there would be a possibility that they could go to a higher density housing. Their financing partner needed more units than what could be provided at that point in time. So I don't know that they're opposed to something. But the circulation is going to be adding more traffic out there at Brace Road, so it's something to think about.
Yeah, it would probably come out onto Stone and then onto Brace.
And who's got their hand up?
Randy.
Randy, go ahead.
Okay, I would like Mary Beth to craft a motion so that I could make it.
She was just trying to hang up one.
Well, she doesn't do that for me at my meeting.
That's all I got.
Okay. So this motion is related to high-density residential sites. And the motion would be of the General Plan Update Land Use Committee to forward your recommendations for high-density residential sites, specifically 2.2 acres of Heritage Park, and then potential additional sites, future sites of I think it's the Sierra Presbyterian Rockland Road Church. Sierra Christian Church on Rockland Road. 2 half-acre parcels fronting, well, one fronts Taylor, one fronts Shawn Way. The King Road Church site closest to Interstate 80. Congregational Church. In addition, and Andy said it best, the church sites considered for future potential.
I think that's a separate motion, right?
No, you could do it all in this one.
All in one?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
And I would
the
use
town would-
Andy's language.
Yeah, the town would consider church sites on an individual basis that achieve the town's housing needs.
And encourage dialogue with the churches.
Right.
Um,
And then did you want to add to the motion as a committee the discussion about, overall preference that the affordable house or the high density housing is not in the rural areas, but is concentrated closer to the downtown?
Yes.
Yes.
So moved.
We have a public member.
Dottie, did you have a comment?
I thought I heard them say that you were going to put senior housing in that area, not high density housing. So I'm just questioning, because are they the same? And I apologize if they are, and I don't know that.
They're sort of the same and sort of not. So under the requirements of what we need to do tonight, we have to designate them for high density, and then staff would work with the developer to hopefully bring in senior housing. But I can't guarantee that that's what we would get, but that is what we would try to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, so did we have the full motion on the table?
That is a full motion.
All right, is there a second?
I thought we were kind of more general though than a high density for churches. I thought that was kind of putting a more.
We didn't say high density for churches. We said that we would consider the churches on an individual basis based on their ability to work with the town in achieving the town's housing needs. So the churches were separate from the recommendation for high density.
Okay, it sounded like they were included under.
It's
high
all part of the
density.
same motion, but that we could, in the motion, make it very clear that the churches are not recommended for high density, but they're recommended to achieve the housing needs for the town of Loomis.
We could word it such a way, a lot of the other recommendations are, it's, you know, recommendation, you guys are moving recommended action, and it would be to A and a B. One would be to accept the recommendation for the high density housing as modified and then explained at tonight's meeting. And the second half being, like, part B would be to work with the churches and to encourage and open a dialogue with churches in the local area to help us achieve our housing needs.
And Randy, if I may add one additional item to your motion?
Please.
The committee recognizes that this completes our task at this time and that we have an opportunity to participate in the land use element review by the Planning Commission and Town Council of the draft 2020-2040 general plan update.
Perfect.
Is there a second? Bonnie seconded it. And can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Randy Elder,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Jan Clark-Kretz,
Yes.
Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Hey,
Good job, guys.
I think this wraps up our 20th meeting. Is that right?
19.
19.
There were 20 scheduled,
Okay.
but one was
Right.
not a quorum.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for doing such amazing work for the town of Loomis that we love so much. And while it was certainly tedious, I know that every single second has been deeply great. We're deeply gracious for all the seconds and thoughts and opinions from everybody of our public members to the committee members. I feel like this committee was really wonderful because we had such a diverse sense of points of view on some items, and everybody had really wonderful things to say, and I loved how respectful and dedicated we were during this process. I just want to thank each and every one of you and our experts as well, and the public.
And I would like to thank everybody and thank Sean for all the work that he's doing negotiating on things behind the scenes. And I understand with Hidden Grove, you know, I think if we can get some affordable housing there, that would be great. And in my opinion, that is the very best place for the senior housing rather than Heritage Park. If we can't get it at Hidden Grove, we can do it there instead. But ideally, if we can get some, even if it's part affordable there and part market rate, if that could be senior, that gives them walkable, easy walking to the library, to downtown, to Rayleigh's, compared to having to go from Heritage Park and walk around and up the hill and cross at a very unsafe traffic light there, which is owned by Caltrans, apparently not by us, and there's no way to get across if you're stuck in the middle. And if you're a senior and go slowly, you can easily get stuck in the middle. So I would hope that, if possible, we can get senior housing in Heritage, in Hidden Grove, even if it's part market rate. You typically have fewer parking spaces required for seniors and things like that. So stick up for Sean, and we wish you well on that for the sake of the whole town, Sean, and your mental health as well.
Gary might just be surprised at my negotiation skills at the end of this, and you can buy me a beer if I make it there. How about that?
All right. Shall we adjourn?
We
All
should.
right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Way to go, team.